Hi friends, I'm Haroon Rajput and you are watching my podcast channel Haroon Rajput Podcast. Today is very special guest with me. Uh, she's very multi-talented. So without time wasting, I am introduced to Sandra. Welcome Sandra in my show.
First of all, Haroon Rajput, thank you for inviting me. I'm truly happy to be here on your podcast and to have the opportunity to share my story with you and your audience.
First question is, who is Sandra?
My story begins in Leipzig, East Germany, in 1972. I was born with a serious heart defect and underwent one of the first operations of its kind in East Germany. Even before I was born, life was complicated. My mother was only 17 years old when she became pregnant with me. In those days, an unmarried pregnancy was considered a disgrace. My grandfather threw her out of the house, and she had to face life largely on her own. When I was 3 years old, she met the man I would call my father. He was not my biological father, but he became the father who raised me. We lived in a small village, and despite having very little money, my childhood was filled with freedom. I spent my days outdoors in nature, reading books from the library, drawing, writing stories, and helping my father, who was a carpenter, work with wood. At the age of 12, I was sent to boarding school. I loved sports and was talented enough to be selected for a government sports school in the GDR. For a child from a small village, that was a huge opportunity. But because of my heart condition, I could not stay. Once again, a dream disappeared before it could begin. Growing up in East Germany meant that travel was almost impossible. We could not simply explore the world, so I traveled through books. I read constantly and dreamed that one day I would see the places I could only imagine. I started writing stories when I was 9 or 10 years old, long before I ever imagined becoming an author. I completed my Abitur, but by then history was changing. The Berlin Wall fell, the GDR disappeared, and suddenly the future became uncertain. My parents were poor. Sometimes there was barely enough money for food. Studying at university was simply not financially possible. At 17, I crossed into West Berlin with my boarding school class. That experience later became part of my memoir, Blonde Burnt Barefoot. For the first time, I saw a different world and realized how much larger life could be. I had dreamed of studying theatre studies in Leipzig, but dreams often collide with reality. Since university was out of reach, I trained as a hairdresser. My plan was to continue into costume design and eventually study. Life, however, had other plans. At 19, I met the man who would become my husband. Together, we moved to the Netherlands. What I thought would be a temporary adventure became a new life. Over the following decades, I lived in Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. I studied German as a foreign language, education, psychology, and art. I worked as a teacher for more than 30 years and became the mother of 2 daughters. Then, after 50, I reinvented myself once again. I moved to Egypt. For many people, that decision made no sense. Why would a German woman leave Europe and start over in North Africa? For me, it was a return to the curiosity that had defined my life since childhood. Egypt offered history, mythology, culture, and stories everywhere I looked. Today I write under the pen name S.B. Darkmoor. My books explore mythology, folklore, psychology, and the unseen traditions that connect cultures across centuries. My best-known work, The Jinn Never Sleep, grew out of years of research and conversations about belief, storytelling, and the mysteries that continue to fascinate humanity. When people ask who I am, I often smile because there is no simple answer. I am a former East German girl who dreamed of seeing the world, a teacher who became an author, a psychologist who writes fiction, a carpenter's daughter who became an artist, and a woman who learned that it is never too late to begin a completely new chapter.
Okay Sandra, looking back, was the period after your divorce the most difficult chapter of your life?
Haroon, for more than 30 years, I had built a life that I thought would last forever. Then suddenly, everything changed. My marriage ended, and overnight, I found myself having to rebuild my life from scratch. I needed a new apartment, a new job, a new routine, and a new future. After decades of sharing responsibilities, I was carrying everything alone. At exactly the same time, my mother became terminally ill. She was only 66 years old. So while I was dealing with heartbreak, uncertainty, and the loss of the life I had known, I also became my mother's caregiver. Anyone who has cared for a dying parent knows what that means. You put your own pain aside because someone you love needs you more. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed. I was exhausted physically, emotionally, and mentally. Looking back now, I can honestly say I was depressed. I felt lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. When my mother passed away, I lost not only my mother, but also one of the last connections to my childhood and my past. For a while, life felt empty. But sometimes life strips everything away so that you can discover who you really are. Slowly, I found my way back to the things I had loved as a child. I started painting again. I started writing again. I started creating again. At first, it wasn't about becoming an author. It wasn't about publishing books. It was simply survival. Art became my therapy. Writing became my therapy. Instead of allowing pain to destroy me, I used it as fuel for creativity. The interesting thing about suffering is that it can make you bitter or it can make you deeper. I chose to turn it into something meaningful. Looking back today, I don't see that period only as a tragedy. I see it as a transformation. Without the divorce, without the grief, without caring for my mother, I might never have become the person I am today. I might never have moved to Egypt. I might never have written my books. I might never have become S.P. Darkmore. The darkest chapter of my life became the beginning of my most creative one.
Okay, Sandra, how did you find yourself again after losing so much?
Haroon, I think many people reach a moment in life when they no longer recognize themselves. For years I had been a wife, a mother, a teacher, a caregiver. I was taking care of everyone around me, but somewhere along the way I had forgotten the young girl who loved stories, art, and adventure. After my mother passed away, I was forced to sit alone with myself. No distractions, no roles, no expectations, just me. And I realized that the happiest version of myself had always been the creative one. The little girl who spent hours in libraries, the teenager who filled notebooks with stories, the young woman who dreamed of seeing the world. So I began returning to those parts of myself, not because I had a plan, but because I needed to survive. And in the process, I found myself again.
Was writing always part of who you were?
Absolutely, Haroon. I wrote my first stories when I was 9 or 10 years old. Even when life became busy, the stories never disappeared. They simply waited. Teaching, marriage, raising children. The responsibilities occupied most of my life for many years. But the storyteller was always there. After my divorce and the loss of my mother, writing returned with an intensity I had never experienced before. For the first time, I wasn't writing because I wanted to become an author. I was writing because I had something to say, because I had lived, because I had suffered, because I had survived. The stories became deeper because life had become deeper.
Okay, Sandra, why did you decide leave the Europe and move to Egypt?
Let me think, Haroon. Many people thought I was crazy, a woman over 50, starting over in a foreign country after losing almost everything. But I didn't see it as running away. I saw it as running towards something. Egypt awakened the same feeling I had as a child when I read books about distant places. Wonder, curiosity, adventure. For the first time in many years, I felt alive again. I wasn't interested in comfort anymore. I was interested in growth. Egypt gave me a completely new chapter, new inspiration, and eventually the environment in which my books could truly come to life. All my books cover real places and a lot of own experiences in different ways.
Okay, Sandra, where are you today? And what comes next for Sandra and S.B. Darkmore?
Where am I today, Haroon? Good question. Today, I find myself in a place I could never have imagined as a young girl growing up in East Germany. I am an international author
nice.
writing in German and English under the pen name S.B. Darkmoor. My books are inspired by real places, real experiences, history, mythology, and the cultures I have encountered throughout my life. What makes me especially proud is that my work has crossed borders and languages. One of my novels, The Jinn Never Sleep, has attracted readers from different countries and cultures. Recently, I signed a publishing agreement with one of Egypt's well-known publishing houses for the Arabic edition of The Jinn Never Sleep. For me, this is a very special moment because the book itself was inspired by years of research, travel, and experiences in the Middle East. As a writer, there is no greater compliment than seeing your stories reach people from different backgrounds and languages. At the moment, I continue writing, researching, and exploring new ideas. I am working on new books while building bridges between cultures through storytelling. Looking back, the journey from East Germany to Egypt seems almost unbelievable, but perhaps that is the lesson of my life. Sometimes the chapters we never planned become the most meaningful ones.
Okay, Sandra, what inspired you to write The Jinn Never Sleep?
Haroon. The idea for The Jinn Never Sleep did not come from a single moment. But it's a combination of a personal experience and research. It grew over many years through my fascination with mythology, psychology, folklore, and the stories people tell about the unseen world. Living in Egypt gave me a completely new perspective. I encountered ancient traditions, local legends, and cultural beliefs that had survived for centuries. Rather than writing a simple horror story, I wanted to explore why stories about jinn continue to exist across different cultures and what they reveal about human nature. My background as a teacher, my studies in psychology, and my love of research all influenced the book. I spent years reading historical sources, studying myths, and speaking with people about their personal experiences and beliefs. The result became a novel that combines fiction, history, psychology, and cultural storytelling. For me, The Jinn Never Sleep is not only a story about the unseen world. It is also a story about fear, belief, and the mysteries that continue to fascinate humanity.
What message do you hope readers take away from your work?
If there is one message, Haroon, I hope readers take away from my books, it is the importance of curiosity and open-mindedness. We live in a world that often encourages us to see things in black and white. Yet history, culture, and human experience are far more complex. Through my stories, I invite readers to explore different perspectives, ask questions, and look beyond their own assumptions. Whether I write about mythology, ancient traditions, or the psychological aspects of fear and belief, my goal is never to tell people what to think. Instead, I hope to inspire them to think for themselves. I also believe that stories can build bridges between cultures. Having grown up in East Germany, lived for decades in the Netherlands, and now living in Egypt, I have learned that despite our differences, people everywhere share similar hopes, fears, dreams, and questions. If my books encourage even one person to become more curious about another culture or to see the world through a different lens, then I consider that a success. Haroon Rajput, thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you and your audience. I truly enjoyed our conversation. From a little girl in East Germany who dreamed about distant places while sitting in a library, to an author living in Egypt whose books are now reaching readers in multiple languages, it has been an unexpected journey. I hope my story reminds people that it is never too late to reinvent yourself, follow your curiosity, and begin a completely new chapter. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you.